Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In today's special episode, we sat down with Frank Gaffney, Executive Chairman for the Center for Security Policy. He's one of the authors who released this report titled "The CCP is at War with America." It touches on the pandemic and goes beyond that. Let's dive in. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me.
So I want to begin with your background a little bit. So you were the Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Reagan administration, and you're also the former chair of NATO's high-level group, which deals with nuclear power. And so you come with a lot of defense background, and you recently helped write this report titled "The CCP is at War with America." So to begin, Frank, can you explain the title?
We're aimed at focusing Americans' attention, and that, for that matter, others, on a reality that an awful lot of folks still don't understand. And that is that the Chinese Communist Party has basically, since it came to power, had its sights set on destroying America in the interest of achieving its objectives, which are global domination, as you and your audience know very well. A lot of people find that hard to believe. They certainly have not paid attention to the abundant evidence that China's been engaged in what it calls unrestricted warfare against us, to this point, mostly of the non-kinetic kind, but that among the techniques that it has identified in a book of that name, Unrestricted Warfare, by two senior PLA colonels, is biological warfare. And the book is focused on what we have learned about the Chinese illegal biological warfare program, its objectives, its progress, and its use. And that gives rise to this conclusion: the CCP is at war with America.
And Frank, you mentioned how on the surface, some may argue that America sees China as a competitor rather than an adversary. But you mentioned you and your team have an abundance of evidence that proves otherwise. So give us some examples of that evidence.
Well, the impetus behind this study was to try to provide a second opinion on the Director of National Intelligence assessment of September 2021, in which there was kind of a big shrug out of the intelligence community as to whether the origin of the virus known as SARS-CoV-2 was natural occurring or was produced by a laboratory. And what we found was there was zero evidence that it came from nature. And there is abundant, albeit circumstantial, evidence that it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a biological warfare level 4 lab in the heart of Wuhan. So what we've really come up with is evidence in terms of the genetic structure, in terms of the lengths the Chinese have gone to conceal information about this virus, the degree to which the Chinese, most especially, set about at the very moment that they were trying to contain the movement of people from Wuhan anywhere in China, they nonetheless were facilitating the movement of those people internationally, including to the United States. In fact, I was told today that there is some evidence that the Chinese government was paying for people from Wuhan to go visit their families in the United States during this window when the virus was first being discovered and addressed.
And Frank, earlier you mentioned the term unrestricted warfare and how one of the main ones of the CCP is biowarfare. So how does that tie into the pandemic?
Well, in our book, and people can find it at ccpatwar.com, we talk not only about the current pandemic, but about the history of China's interest in biological warfare. And this is all the more important because, of course, the Chinese are by treaty not supposed to have a biological warfare program, let alone one that is as active, as ambitious, and as aggressive as the one we've now been exposed to, in the worst sense of the word. And what I think we've discovered about this is that the Chinese Communist Party has, going back to Deng Xiaoping's general secretaryship of the CCP, had as the purpose of their biological warfare activities being able to depopulate the United States and colonize it with Chinese. Now, this sounds over the top or even unbelievable, but we have this from a secret speech that was given about 20 years ago by the then defense minister of China by the name of Chi Hao-chen, not in public, but to a secret party cadre meeting. And in that, he was very explicit that the purpose of this is offensive in character, and its target is the United States. And as I say, its ambition is to preserve the infrastructure of our country, but get rid of the people so that the Chinese can take it over. And what's interesting is that what we discovered in recent Chinese writings, in military journals and scientific publications, open source, are people in the Chinese biological warfare program talking about the work they're doing, including work aimed at trying to genetically engineer the ability of these diseases that they're cooking up to attack certain ethnicities or nationalities or, geographic areas, perhaps, in their populations. So it remains to be seen whether they can do that. There's some skepticism on our side, certainly at the moment, but the fact that they're pursuing it and they're talking about the utility and value of biological warfare is something we ignore at our extreme peril, especially against the backdrop that 1 million of us have been killed by a biological warfare attack that they've already launched.
And expanding on that a bit, Frank, it seems right now big in the headlines is the Russian war in Ukraine and the Taiwan question about whether Beijing will do the same in regards to Taiwan. And it's interesting that the report notes that China is pushing the Taiwan issue while hiding the real issue underneath it, which is America, and that their ultimate goal is to defeat America. So given all this, that it seems the U.S. and allies' attention is elsewhere, how can the American public really balance that and know what the ultimate problem is?
It's a very good question. I think what we need to do is go back to that speech by then Defense Minister Chi Hao-chen, in which he very explicitly said, there's a lot of talk about Taiwan, but the real target of our operations and warfighting strategy is the United States. And what I think we have been confronting is certainly evidence that the Chinese are deadly serious about having their way with Taiwan. But what's less obvious, but no less important, is to understand that they realize that whatever they're going to do vis-a-vis Taiwan, or for that matter, anything else in the Western Pacific, they're going to have to neutralize the United States. So what I think Americans need to be thinking about is, based on reports like this one, again, available at ccpatwar.com, is the evidence continues to accrue that the Chinese are determined, whether it's through non-kinetic warfare means or kinetic ones, or some combination of the two, including biological warfare, to prevent this country from continuing to represent a challenge to its ambitions, and thereby to essentially defeat, destroy the country and its people. And that ought to concentrate the minds of all of us, because as again Tucker said last night, they will not be kind masters in the event they succeed in taking over the world. But in the process, a lot of us are going to be killed. No doubt about that.
And Frank, any last words you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think this is the critical takeaway from all of it. We believe that what is going on is of such importance that it really needs to become one of the foremost issues in the 2022 elections. And one of the things we hope to do with this Team B report is to brief as many candidates for elective office as we can, so that all of them at least have an understanding of what we're up against, and hopefully will be willing to commit to taking action, if elected, to counter this terrible threat from China and assure the future security of our country and people. So this is the vital place where people who want to know what can they do can be very helpful.
Frank, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
My pleasure, as always. Thank you.
That was Frank Gaffney, Executive Chairman at the Center for Security Policy. And for those watching our full episode, joining us after the break, Rafael Fontana, Brazilian journalist and author of Chernobyl, a journey through the guts of communist dictatorship. He shares what it was like working for the media in China and breaks down what makes Brazil strategically important to the U.S., why Washington doesn't seem to care, and how Beijing is using that against the West. That can be found on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you soon.